Hello, and welcome to another episode of Super Pros Bros. I'm Player 2, Eli, and with me as always is...
Player 1, Ike, and Teddy Roosevelt. Did you know that this pod is on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify?
I did not, bro Pesci. Are those the same places that they could?
Like?
Comment?
Share?
And subscribe?
It sure is.
Well, how about that?
It's freaking crazy, man. The internet, it's a beautiful place.
It can be. Let's not be too generous.
Just like the storytelling landscape can also be a beautiful or place.
Seamless transition to our today's topic.
You couldn't take this apart without a knife.
In case my ham-fisted sibling wasn't clear. Our topic for today is we're going to talk about some things that we believe to be both abysmal and should never be repeated, and then the positive flip side, because we can't just go all negative all the time.
That's like your opinion, man.
Shut the fuck up. So we decided to add to it some things that we think are exemplary and should be kind of emulated more often. Things we wish we could emulate with that level of quality as it's presented.
In our own writing.
In our own writing and own production. Yeah. Things to build to.
Shall we start with the bad and go good?
Always bad into good.
Slight foreshadowing there. So in the bad category, we're going to start off with changing your ending just to be edgy or unpredictable. I first actually experienced this literally firsthand when I was in 5th grade. Did you have Hooper Howe as well?
I did.
Yeah, she was 5th grade, right? Or no, she was...
No. She was 5th grade.
She was
at least she was for me.
She was 5th grade for me, too. I'm sure of it.
I remember... Still really surprised how small that woman is.
Right? Growing up, she commanded the room
huge.
so hard, and we were so small that she seemed like
enormous.
A giantess.
Yeah, she seemed like she's 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
She's like 5'0".
Yeah, she's 5'0" and a wire.
Yeah, she's nothing like, to her.
She's like a pipe cleaner that you stuck into like an electrical socket, just with nothing else.
And just for everyone who doesn't know who this woman is, she's just Miss Frizzle. Like, just imagine Miss Frizzle, like a 5-foot Miss Frizzle, and that's Miss Hooper Howe. That was our 5th grade teacher.
Yeah, and she was Miss Hooper Howe, but instead of a magical school bus, she just ruled her classroom with a very loving iron fist. Shout out, Mrs. Hooper Howe. You were the best.
You rocked.
So, in Mrs. Hooper Howe class, I don't know if you had this experience, but she had us write stories. I think they were all supposed to be mysteries or something like that.
Okay.
But my story was very mediocre, as written by a 5th grader, and the ending was very set up to the point where everybody I showed could guess the ending, and so to like throw them off my trail, I just randomly changed the ending, and there was no rhyme or reason. And I remember even at 5th grade, I was like, man, this is hacky as shit, like taking it away, like, aha, I beat my classmates who could guess my ending, but then I'm like, this sucks, it doesn't make any sense now, but I like doubled down and, stuck with it.
Yeah.
And it turns out that some people haven't moved past that 5th grade mindset. In the case of Game of Thrones, perhaps, as a good example of just, you know what? They figured us out. Time to change the ending because we gotta be different. We gotta be unknowable.
We can't let them know what's happening. The audience can't be intelligent. They can't read the tea leaves. Yeah.
Another foreshadowing. This is one of those ones where stories aren't supposed to be like, they can be, but again, like you'd be setting this up throughout the whole entire writing process. You want your stories to make sense. There needs to be a rhyme or a reason. That's the best part about story. There's this great, I've been watching way too many super clips of Abed from Community, and there's this great scene where Jeff gives him shit for like, life isn't TV. He goes, yeah, in life we have like lovable leading characters. We have stories that make sense. We have rhyme, we have reason, we have rules. And then he gets to throw that at a dagger and goes, in life we have you. Which is just a savage dagger. But his little monologue is like very much to the the core of this, which is, great stories make sense. There is logic, there's checks and balances, it evens out. You have it so that you shouldn't necessarily know the ending, but if you do, that's not a bad thing. And especially with one where so much of the greatness of Game of Thrones, other than its initial shock of like, yeah, we'll kill main characters, we don't give a fuck.
We'll cut people's heads off, no problem.
Yeah. Heads, spikes, walls, boom. But a large part of the reason that show was so popular wasn't because, it was like, oh man, I can't figure this out. It's because it was spectacle. It was great spectacle, and I am in no way taking away its early spectacle. I still go back and watch the shit out of it. It's fucking dope. But it wasn't like, man, I could never have seen that. Like, after season 1 to 2, you figured out, like, where they were going to go with shit, and that's fine. And everybody was still along for it, and I think that's one of the main reasons why it's stupid. Is because you didn't...
Nobody complained that they could figure out how it was probably going to shake down.
Yeah.
That was not a complaint.
The show is literally an epic. The most important thing and the best thing about watching it was epic. Like, it wasn't that it was indeterminable.
You know what's going to happen at the end of the Odyssey? Odysseus is fucking going home. Like, like, how unsatisfying would it be if Odysseus fucking gets sucked into a whirlpool? Like, he didn't make it home, but like, fuck you, Homer. Like, no one would be okay with this. And no one was okay with the end of Game of Thrones for this reason. It was...
amongst many others.
Yeah, like, just, I mean, this, especially since the cast is human. Like, they're supposed to be human, and humans are inherently predictable to some degree, especially with the more time you get with them, the more you understand what motivates them, what's going to drive them. And so for everyone to suddenly just, like, have a stroke and be acting completely out of character was super unsatisfying. Like you said, it's all spectacle at a certain point. And, like, you want to see it fulfilled. You want that kind of closure and catharsis that comes with it. And they just flipped off the audience like, you don't get to say how it's going to go down. It's like, no, but we can hate it instead.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of hating it instead, what you got next on the docket?
So, I am of the opinion that if you're writing fiction, you should know what you're writing and, like, kind of stay in your lane.
Yeah. And know what you're writing, and I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, know who you're writing for.
Yes, exactly. Like, as much as I hate them, the Michael Bay Transformers movies sold like goddamn hotcakes because you wanted to come and see robot fights, and you got robot fights.
Hey!
I mean, the stories are garbage, but, like, you got robot fights.
Yeah, he delivered what was requested.
Yes, like, critical trash, absolute swill, but there was a lot of bangs and booms, so... And so you really so there's kind of the thought of deferred gratification.
You're going to want to break that down a little bit.
So the idea is that you don't give people immediately what they want. People like the build up, the hype, the crescendo and swell, and sometimes you're absolutely denying people what they want, and you're making your film or your story kind of arduous. Mm-hmm. And you're not keeping your audience in mind. It's like you're taking your audience for granted and just kind of jerking yourself off. And there is such an egregious example of this in the first modern Godzilla. I say modern, it came out in like 2015. It's one that had Bryan Cranston, and they absolutely
okay. I was like, when you said that, I was going back to the 90s one with Broderick. Yeah. Okay, the one with the one in quotes with Cranston.
Yeah, where they absolutely used him for like all of their marketing, and he's in for like half an hour.
Yeah. Still better than Suicide Squad. All the marketing in it for 5 minutes.
I appreciate that it was like so on the nose, because that's like a purposeful middle finger. Where they're like, we know we got you, fucker. Like,
yeah. It was more of a bit and less of like a debate.
Yeah, absolutely. But I digress. So the biggest problem I have with this movie, and like the end is a great payoff for the record. The end is a phenomenal payoff. It's absolutely the monster fight you want. The problem I have is they fucking set themselves up for an initial fight like halfway through the runtime. And then they don't fucking do it. They cut away. they like show about it in a news broadcast that another character is watching on television.
Yeah, it's like they ran out of money or something.
Yeah,
like that.
go fuck yourself. Like, you're gonna make me wait another 35 minutes before I see some fucking monster fights?
And also, like, not only see other monster fights, you don't get to see that monster fight. So, like, they're down one monster fight that they can't give you back.
Yeah. Like, it's gone. Like, it was
it's like
just...
they were doing it. It's like it was a freaking, like, student film. It was like the student film Godzilla.
Yeah. and so, just, like, don't... You've got it to a point. Like, there's a compromise where you've got to be able to give people what they want. Like, you know, if I'm going to a Godzilla movie, I'm going there to see monster fights. Don't hold out on me. Like... Yeah. The positive inverse of this, I guess, would be like the Godzilla vs. Kong. No shortage. I'm happier with that movie. So much happier. Story, kind of swill. But goddamn was I entertained.
But that's not why you came there in the first place.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's why nobody goes to Godzilla. I don't want to say nobody. I have yet to meet the person that goes to Godzilla being like, this is going to be, Citizen Kane with, like, hairy arms and scaly back.
Listen, those are the same people that read Sports Illustrated for the articles.
I think you mean Playboy, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, pick the more lurid one. All right, what's next on the ugly list here?
So there's this thing, and the farther back part of this is the history of cinema and the history of fiction, mostly being written by men, and up until probably more likely a decade than 2 decades more, but definitely hasn't
completely gone away.
It definitely hasn't gone away, but it's only started to, like, really come into frame, if you will, in the last probably 10 years. It definitely should have been more, but we are where we are, and that's where we are.
Sure.
So the big problem I have is when the girl says no and the guy persisted, basically. I was trying to make reference to, like, a fancy poem and I spaced it. Anyway, there's so much of the time where it's, guy gets friend zoned, guy gets told no, girl has boyfriend already, and since he's our main character, he's like, I ain't giving up that easy. It's like, yeah, but you kind of should. Like, yeah. Or it's not handled in a way that, the one way I feel like that it reasonably could be handled in a more realistic, healthy way that isn't, is instead of, oh, I have a boyfriend, and then the guy, pulled a fucking, what's his name from The Office, Jim Harper, and was just, like, angling in ever so slowly for, like, multiple seasons, being a bully to a jerk, but he's prettier, so it's fine. It's like, why are we showing these as positive character traits? Because it's so constant, especially in rom-coms for, he's not pretty, but he's smart and charming and a good guy, where every good-looking guy is an asshole. It's like, why can't we have a moment where, Jim Harper gets told, like, Jim Harper character is like, Pam's like, oh, I'm sorry, but, I've got a boyfriend. And they just take the line. I don't want to say alpha. I don't want to say man up or anything toxic or stupid, because that's not what it is. And just took some courage and went, I know that, but I'm better. And just made a fight for it, as opposed to waited it out for the right moment. Like, if you're really in that situation, you believe this person is the one for whatever reason, you think they're insanely attractive and you want to be with them. You just really like them as a person. You think their boyfriend's trash. Why is there this waiting for the boyfriend to commit a borderline criminal or moral criminal act, as opposed to the guy just being like, look, I want to be with you and I think you should be with me, and here's the reasons. And just, like, put it out there and, made a case for themselves, and then if the person said no, left. But, as opposed to this hanging around, negging, occasionally being, like, really
the super
pushy.
Awkward and toxic passive-aggressive routine that we get to see all the time. Yeah.
The quintessential example of this, I think it's from... Okay, so I did some mild research real quick and couldn't find the video I'm talking about. But if I can, I will put it in the doobly-doo. But my example comes from Star Wars, where in Empire Strikes Back, Episode 2 for the good people, Episode 5 for the loser nerds.
Jesus.
Strong take, whatever, fuck it. We out here. So throughout the whole one, throughout all of Star Wars, Han is just mercilessly hitting on Leia to the point where it's pretty egregious, but it really comes to a head. And I think the problem is mostly that it works, sadly. And so, like, you get, like, positive affirmation after negative action, which is not healthy or good. But in Empire Strikes Back, just from the start of the movie, he's being, just like, hey, girl, like, sliding in her, like, metaphorical DMs and just, like, pushing his agenda. And she's just like, ew, gross, no.
No.
In no uncertain terms, she is saying no. And yet the man persisted. And then after, like, physically entering her space, accosting her, they're stuck on a spaceship, but still, like, very much in her area, wins her over with his manly wilds, and they make out, and from that point on, she's his girl. And that is such a problematic stereotype, mostly because, and just, like, crutch to Leon, because it's untrue, it's unhealthy, there's all the uns that it could be.
Yeah.
And yet, we look at it back with rose-tinted glasses, partially because of the time that it was made in, this is made in the 80s, I think. And it's like, times were different back then. What society overall was willing to tolerate is different. Are those movies great? Yes. Are those circumstances problematic? Yes. Are we still going to kind of laugh at them awkwardly? Probably.
Yep.
Should we do better moving forward? Definitely.
No.
All right, I'm gonna sit down on my step down off my soapbox and scoot it over a little bit for you.
Yeah, just to kind of comment on your first point of, like, you wish people just kind of they ditch the kind of weird passive aggressive, they ditch the negging, all that shit. Because this show does so much good writing, of course Brooklyn Nine-Nine has something good in this. And there's an episode where Boyle is on pain meds and he's just fucking truth bombing everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding. But there's a point where he talks to Jake, and because Jake is so disheartened and feels kind of disenfranchised because Amy is dating. Oh,
yep.
What the fuck's his name? Like Brett?
The most unforgettable character, or the most forgettable character.
He is such a fucking whipping post. They keep refer to him throughout the show as the most boring man in America. Like, he's the worst. He sucks. But she goes, you know why he's dating her? Or why she's dating him? Because he asked.
Yeah.
And you didn't. And that's it. It's so on the nose where it's like, because he had the stones to ask. Like,
yeah,
like, just, if you're going to drop the whole, like, be a man about something, like, be upfront. But then be willing to take no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit more social philosophy than movie writing, but it still kind of plays.
I think it is like really good though, that idea of being like, yeah, you have to ask. And there's other ones where, and like, sadly, there's a couple times in that show where they kind of lean back on some different problematic cultures, one of which is being like, they flip the gender role so it's okay. Like the amount of swooning that Gianelli does on
Yep.
It's just like, that's double standard. But
I think that is very deliberate, for the record. Like,
yeah.
I think that's,
I don't know.
I think it's very deliberately written in, and it's very clearly problematic at numerous.
Yeah.
Like, it's called out as problematic at a couple intervals. But like,
it's called out as problematic, but the way it is then handled is like it's just given lip service and no action is taken. I understand why. Just again, this is one of those things that in 20 years we're gonna look back and like, oh yeah, women raping guys is okay. There's this like flip reverse. It's an overcorrection. You see it constantly in like literature, and you see it constantly in society where it's thing is bad, okay, let's correct, and we never get it right the first time. We have to go all the way too far to the right, to go back to the left, to just barely miss it and come back. It's a balancing act, and it takes, decades upon decades to get it right.
Sure.
But it is what it is, and we're not going to talk about sociological society philosophy here. That's just, that's not what we're here for. But it is definitely one of those things that is going away but needs to go away forever. And to be fair, in both directions, because it's not, well, gone away in the fact that it's as a positive character trait, I guess, or like not discussed as a negative character trait, because that, I think that's like one of the dangerous things, is when it's like shown as being, take it or leave it, as opposed to, no, this is bad. Does that make sense? And it is like, back in the day it used to be good, then it went to just like guys will be guys, and now it's getting talked about as being like, is this okay? And it's not, and so it is going away, but it needs to go away harder than it is. But good step in the right direction.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Speaking of hearing what I'm saying, why don't you tell me what you're saying? Strong transition. Strongest transition ever.
Good lord.
That was so bad.
That might win for the most ham-fisted transition ever in the fucking history of podcasting and recorded cinema.
See how big my smile is.
I can feel it from 4 states away, or 2 states or whatever.
4 states. Jesus Christ, when'd you move? If we were on the East Coast, it'd be 9 states away.
I can't even see straight how bad that was.
Can't even look at you. No, literally, I can't look at you. You're not sharing video.
Stop. So one thing that the things are often guilty of are Deus Ex or Deus Ex Machina. The surprise hero gets away with it. It's bailed out of a terrible circumstance. That isn't to say I entirely hate that they happen. But there's a specific brand of them that offends me more than the rest. That is when people
tell.
They're just when people fucking bust surprise powers out of their ass, and just like,
or surprise. I think not only surprise power ups, but also like surprise kind of. It doesn't necessarily need to be a new power, but like the range, dimension, distance that their power can go.
Yeah. When just abruptly, it especially when it's like, because there's some examples that it's just fucking magnitudes of power that it's just like, bro, you were bench pressing like a car earlier and you just chucked the Chrysler Building. What the fuck happened here? Like,
it's kind of like there's this great bit by the magnificent Bill Burr where he's talking about like steroid era stats. He's like, what the fuck? He's like, dude, in high school you were batting like 10 homers, and now you're in the big leagues and you're hitting 40 on season one, like on your first time out. It's like what the fuck, dude? Like this is like this is bullshit. It's kind of like that, where it's just like, bruh, you were like a pushover to all the bullies, but now that the bullies have been beaten by Super Monster Red, you can like man up and like throw that thing to the moon. Beg pardon?
And there's a number of offenders this, and I think as a genre, shonen anime is the most egregious offender.
Fact.
Yeah, they are, and it's made for kids, and it's made to be so the good guy always wins. And there's any number of just like, well, they win, I guess. Fairy Tail is really bad about it. Like, God, they're bad about it, actually. I should have devoted more time to talking about them. Naruto does love to bust out surprise power-ups, like with Naruto himself. Like, he's the endless supply of energy from the fox. That bails him out. That one at least has, like, some kind of sense. It feels a bit cheatsy the first time around, but, like, afterwards you kind of come to expect it. It just... Yeah. It's... The problem with Naruto is that the kind of escalation of power goes fucking apeshit.
So, I mean, you can even look at back, like, Naruto is just a furthering of the needle via, like, DBZ, where they wrote it into the power system of going Super Saiyan is a thing. Yeah. And so, like, there was, like, and then there was, 2 people can become 1, there was these weird training arcs, there was all this stuff, and so, like,
when you
it
don't
was canonical,
somebody as, like, and the problem is if you don't introduce somebody as the tops, and leave him as the tops, you just push that. You're always allowed to introduce somebody new and push that needle and push that needle and like, until the point where you get like universe breaking characteristics.
When you start fighting God.
Yeah, but I think one of the easiest examples of bullshit, of just absolute out of nowhere bullshit, surprise power ups has to come from Superman. And this one is actually kind of a landmark because it kind of broke comic books.
Yeah.
And so back in the like late 90s, I think.
I'll look that up. Keep going.
Thank you. But DC Comics were starting to like lose revenue, and so they're like, okay, how can we fucking shock value our audience? And like, I got it. We can kill Superman, which banger. I mean, he's the iconic fucking DC hero.
The Death of Superman, Superman Volume 2, number 75, came out in January 1993.
1993.
93,
okay. Cut out for a second. Okay. So, they create Doomsday because they've never had, like, a physical match for Superman. Right? They've got Lex Luthor.
Sorry.
Surprise, Nero.
I'm glad you got the reference at least. That means I didn't do that bad of a job.
It's terrible, but I knew what you were going for.
Yeah.
What's the way you said Doomsday? Anyway, so they create a genuine physical match for Superman. They create another fucking crazy Kryptonian, and they just fucking smash their heads together.
The writers are just in the room, just taking two action figures, like, ah!
It's
like running them in. Yeah, just, make fight.
Yeah, and so they believably kill Superman. Obviously, if you fucking, we know he's alive. But at the time, people genuinely thought he was fucking dead. And so they have this whole arc where these kind of pretenders to the throne come to be Superman. Well, it turns out one of them is just actually fucking Superman. Come back with like a fucking mullet.
Rocking it.
Yeah, he just has like this longer hair, but it's still fucking Clark Kent, who's just like, and when confronted by Lois Lane, he's like, oh, I went into a healing coma because that's a thing. So despite him not having a fucking pulse, he just lapsed into some coma and healed. He didn't know that was an option. Because again, reasons, I guess. Yeah, so and absolute bullshit, and it completely opened the door for fucking an endless supply of comic book deaths and, revitalizes. And what pisses me off is that it's such a cheap methodology when it's like, this is the same fucking universe that has people like fucking Brainiac. Like, you could do there's so many plausible and more reasonable explanations for how he fucking comes back to life, and you just dipshitted your way out of this. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm off my soapbox.
Well, like you're saying, it's one of those things that it's just lazy writing instead of like coming up with some plausibility, because it is relatively still a Deus Ex even if they do it. Yeah. Like, obviously the writing in a box, like writing in its most fundamental, the best thing that they could have done is left him dead.
Absolutely.
Like, that is the best thing. The second best thing is having him come back and writing it in a way that, isn't just fuck it, here's how we did it. It's exactly. Like integrating it, whether the technology was beforehand and kind of hidden in the background, whether somebody figures it out, yada yada, but instead it's just like blah, 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 blah. Like, it's the explanation of like a 4-year-old. He can not die. He has superpower, and he just comes back.
Sleep.
Yeah, he just goes to sleep. He wakes up. It's fine. Like that. It's like some Axe Cop writing shit. Except Axe Cop doesn't even write shit that bad. FYI, if you haven't watched, Axe Cop's amazing. Also written by a 5-year-old and has stronger logic than the Death of Superman. Not kidding.
Show.
Oh god, yes. Axe Cop is a show animated magnificently. I think it was on FX. The main character is voiced by Nick Schwartzman, And it's written, or at least the original first season was written by a 5-year-old whose dad was like a producer and like got it made. It's awesome. It's everything you want it to be, and it still has stronger logic than the death of Superman.
Yeah, my fucking briefcase has stronger logic than the death of Superman. Anyway, what's
my
next
Honey Nut Cheerios? You can see why the logic of this thing is
my fucking foot odor makes more goddamn sense than the fucking death of Superman. Anyway, what's next on this hit parade? Get off this topic.
As somebody who is on the spectrum, and having friends who are also on the autism spectrum, and having people I know with other said disabilities, whether they be physical, mental, social, whatever, there is this need after, I feel like it was like in the early ages of cinema, probably like 50s through probably the 70s, if somebody had a disability, they were pitied, whether it be, autism, whatever, crutches, or, mental problems that wouldn't allow them to like also walk socially, if you will.
Sure.
They were always pitied. They were looked at like, oh, you poor thing. And there wasn't really much done with them from anything that I can recall. However, I feel like in and around when autism really started popping off, and like 80s through early 2000s, they really started to make them come into their own. You had What's Eating Gilbert Grape, you had Rain Man, where I feel like they started off as this sad character with a superpower, and then around the late 90s, early 2000s, they started ratcheting it up and just made them be superheroes in everyday society. They were always, if the guy was in a wheelchair, he was also stupid smart to the point where you forgot he was in a wheelchair. He could somehow do all these other things, and it just didn't matter. Or, you have them be a little bit,
quirky.
Socially awkward or quirky in like the Big Bang Theory, but it's a superpower. They just know way too much, and like they can't be stopped, and they there's no rhyme or reason for their intelligence.
No.
They just are inherently like super smart. And there are people that have that thing, that is a real thing. There are certain people with autism that have been able to use it, or it just has, manifested in their life a certain way where they are borderline just, brainiac, where they're just super smart and they like hyper focus on their field and they're able to use it to their benefit. Mm-hmm. That's cool. That is not a good or fair portrayal for the shit ton of other people who can't figure out how to walk up to a stranger that they think is neat and say hi. Yeah. This is not fair to the people that, being in a wheelchair fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it just plain simple. No people in wheelchairs, they're not about it.
Nobody
they would trade it in.
Is happy that they're in a wheelchair.
They would trade it in instantaneously. If the devil came up to them, how would you like to be out of that wheelchair? All you have to do is, they've signed the form already. They're like, yep, I'm in. Like, take it.
Yeah.
And so to so constantly, I don't want to say always, but to so constantly show people with disabilities, whether it be physical or mental, as if it has no cost, or the cost is vastly outweighed by the benefits, is just disingenuous and unfair and non-representative. Like I was talking about with the way girls are being treated and how it's just not fair. It's not fair to society to show something that is so bad and doesn't work, or hopefully shouldn't work, as this thing that is borderline good and just works constantly. Mm-hmm. It's also the same kind of thing where it's not fair to these people to be shown, because then you expect it. It's like if for a long time, every Asian character was the stereotype that was amazing
so
at math.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, imagine being an Asian person who was good, just decent at math.
Or imagine if their interest was in literature.
Yeah. Or they weren't well suited in math. They just, it wasn't for them. They loved and could write circles around you. They're viewed as lesser because they're not meeting this bar that has been set at
expectation from someone else.
Exactly. So it's the same thing, if you now, after watching, way too much Big Bang Theory, way too much House, way too much whatever show you want on television, if you met somebody who's autistic and they're just like, all they knew how to, like, they couldn't make good small talk. They gave bad hugs. And then you're like, all right, well, they're going to, solve something. It's like, no, they're not.
They're just some asshole. Just like you.
They're just a guy, just like you, or a girl, just like you, or a person, just like you. To put them effectively on this pedestal because of the way they keep being portrayed as if they're like Superman, but in our universe. It's like fucked up and not fair.
Here's a shitty reality is that in literature, we want there to be a constant cost and reward associated with everything. It's like the truth is that some people just have it's a disability. It doesn't come with a fucking perk. It's not D&D where you get, like effectively perk points for taking on negatives. That's not how it works. Some people just have an accident and they don't get their fucking legs no more. That's it.
Some people
rough fucking draw.
Some people were born into a rich family and they get to do whatever they want with no cost.
Yeah. And
life ain't fair, yo. It sucks. It's bullshit. That's why we like story, is because we get to make it a little bit more fair, but at the same time we get to make it fair. We don't get to make it bullshit.
Yeah.
This is just wish fulfillment for people that had friends, significant others, family members that were, cursed with this disability, and being like, well, there's a friend of mine who is on crutches, and somebody, this is a car shop or something like that, somebody came in and said, he just didn't hear the conversation, just heard handy capable, fucking flew off the rails. He's just like, you shut the fuck up right now with that shit. And they're like, whoa, what's this about? It's like, stop spouting that. Like, yes, I am capable, I can do things, but to take the cost of that away from me and spin it as if there is some positivity towards me not being able to use my legs is bullshit. Am I still a human being? Yes. Should you still treat me as a human being and not as like a poodle that you need, get taken care of like a rescue dog or something? Absolutely. But it still sucks.
Yeah.
Them's just the facts.
Yeah. There's kind of one thought is like the show, in a way, the show MASH did a very good job every episode. They made a point to address that war is a horror story, and it sucks. And so my kind of thought around this is like, if you're gonna have somebody who has got some kind of disability, be sure to show that it absolutely sucks.
Yeah.
Like, don't sugarcoat that.
You were talking about, before we were going over this in notes, you were talking about how there was one of your favorite episodes of Scrubs had a good example of this.
They have like a visiting surgeon who's got obsessive compulsive disorder, and it drives Dr. Cox absolutely nuts because the guy is obnoxiously intelligent and it just retains everything. And Dr. Cox feels like he finally remembers something better. Like it's such a petty and small victory, but he's so proud of himself and he goes in to fucking flaunt it. And
it's not Cox. It's JB.
I'm pretty sure it's Cox actually.
You're talking about the end where he walks in, he's like washing his hand 1,000 times?
Yeah.
It's JB.
Okay.
Because Cox goes, like, it's in the outro that JB goes over, like, well, some people do this and that. And, like, Cox is home drinking a beer, watching sports with his, like, wife and kid or something.
Okay. But he's just washing his hands, and he tries to leave, and he's like, fuck, and he just can't. He has to do it again. And again. And again. It's like, and he hates it. And he can't stop himself, and he knows it's irrational, and he can't walk out the door. Because it's not done yet. Like, that's... Like, people who have obsessive compulsive disorder wish they didn't do the shit they're doing. Like, they don't like it, but they can't stop fucking counting. Or whatever their tick is,
Alright, like, this one is very much on the small end of the spectrum, but for me, and you can attest to this, the amount of times that I've had to lock my car 3 times or check the handle 3 times before I leave my car is, I don't want to say infinite, but the number is enormously larger than it should be.
You do really check. I'd never actually thought about that, but yeah, you do really check the lock
Check
on
it
your
a lot.
car.
I have an insane problem with object permanence, where the second something leaves my field of vision, I'm like, wait, did that just happen? Did I just do that? To the point where I've had to learn like mnemonic devices, learn tricks to remember that have done this so I can walk away so I can do this. Again, smallest end of the spectrum is that, and I really wish I didn't have it. It does not even remotely control my life, and I still drives me
Drives you
insane.
bonkers.
Yes. So to like take that away, to take the cost away from Sony and only show their benefit is like that of like an infomercial. It's like all you're showing is, you know, what this thing could do, not what it's going to do. All you're showing about, like, all you're showing is the lie, none of the truth.
Mm-hmm. All right. But
to change over to something that's a little bit more truthful and happy.
Yeah, as I say, going from the bad to the good.
From the bocce to the Gucci.
Yes. So there's always the kind of trope of bad guys beaten, bad guy joins the hero squad, you know.
Or
easy.
bad guy shown like one, you know, bad point.
You know, it has
thing.
the Damascene or Damascene you know, conversion.
Yep.
And you know, but what isn't done very often is the kind of slow progression and proper realization. Where like through exposure and through kind of leaving their insular bubble, they get to see like, oh, things are way different than I thought they were, and where I belong is very different because this isn't good. And a kind of change in perspective and genuine change in alignment that's not just abrupt or you know, trauma-based or, you know, I follow the strong man, whatever the fuck, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the best examples, because it's never a list of good stuff without Avatar, is Zuko. And for the show is great, and the best character progression undeniably comes from Zuko, because they give him the farthest to go.
Yep.
And at no
started
point
from the bottom, now he's here.
Yeah, I mean they started. He's so indoctrinated in this warmongering culture, and like it makes sense. You know, that's what he grew up with. That's what he was told. That's what was literally beaten and branded into him. So it makes sense. Like, you're not confused. He's obnoxious. He's meant to be. But you get why.
Yeah.
You also get why he slowly changes. And it's slow. It's real slow. Like, it takes fucking forever. Because there's a lot of stuff to unpack and undo and unlearn. And I think it's so well done. Like, and you see the kind of little slow, quick, and it's not perfect either, which I think is one of the best parts, is that he's still like suspect to temptation and falls prey to Azula offering him, you know, what he thinks he wants, what his old life demanded he should want.
Yeah.
And he takes it and then realizes, and the best part is he realizes when he gets there, he's like, it's so hollow, because he knows that it's fake. It's all based on a lie that he believed and knows is a lie. And so he can't do it, no matter how bad he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so good. And partially because it demands so much time, but there's very few examples I can think of that show that genuine progression of unlearning and de-radicalizing and, you know, converting to the quote-unquote good side through small steps.
Yeah, because so often they've shown these like radical redos, which are a thing, but like
sure, more
often in reality, you know, like this showcasing an Avatar, it is like slow and steady.
Yeah, it
is just, you know, incremental.
And I
have like this effect on people.
Yeah, and I don't have anything against like radical redos or like people who you know, have their eyes just fucking pried open and you have to look at the truth and be like, this is what's happening. Like, oh God, make it stop. Like, I'm okay with that. It's not bad. It's not hackneyed or overplayed necessarily.
Mm.
But it's just, this is not done very much. And again, I think
Yeah.
largely because of how much time it takes. Like, again,
It is.
this is 2 full fucking seasons. And Tsuko gets a lot of screen time. Like, this is very deliberate, very purposeful.
Isn't it more like 2.5? It doesn't come around.
No, you're absolutely right, because he doesn't come around for like 7 or 8 episodes of season 3. Like, it's a long fucking time.
Yeah. It takes forever. And it definitely takes them a second to appreciate him. I think that's the other thing too. A lot of the time, like the appreciation from the other characters of being like, do we trust him?
Yeah, and like their initial thing is like, no shot. Like,
yeah, they're like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, you've spent how much time hunting us? Get the fuck out of here. Like, so what do you got on the list?
So next up on the list we have something a little bit different, which is killing a protagonist, especially one that you're kind of looking at the story through, and then changing who the protagonist is. Because very often, like in Game of Thrones, they were able to kill main characters because the movie is more or less like it's taking place in circumstances, not from like character perspectives as much. And even then, they have a lot of different character perspectives. So if one goes away, they still have, if you chop off one, you still have 7 others. It's like, okay, you can still tell the story. But one of the cool ones that I was exposed to via yourself is from Zero Game, where, and this works differently in books than it would in like other forms of fiction, but I think it can be applied to film as well, where, it's going along, you have this main character who the story is being told from their perspective, and then in yours they get in a car accident, right? Well, in quotes, car accident. Correct?
Yeah. Let's say a dude rails them with a car.
Yeah.
Like it is a car intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're gonna kill him. So, and then from that point, it's from another character's perspective.
Yeah, it swaps to his friend.
Yeah, it swaps to his friend who identifies him with a morgue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that, I'm a big fan of that. And after having you just like go on an awesome rant about how cool that was in some conversation years ago, I definitely wrote, or I'm in the process of writing a screenplay and like wrote a thing for a film or a series that changes perspectives twice. And it really is just so fascinating. It's just one of those spaces that hasn't been played with, and it's kind of like a fun writing frontier. To just be like, just because you start with this horse doesn't mean you have to end with it at the race. You can change horses. So often we're like, okay, we're gonna start with this character, we're gonna end with this character, and that's not bad.
No,
by no means. But it is kind of cool to know and to experiment with the idea of like, we can do that, and it's fine. But
absolutely a hell of a bait and switch.
We don't have to. It's not even like a bait and switch though, or it doesn't have to be, I guess I should say, because you can do this in like there might be circumstances where you're filming a show and then one of the characters gets accused of something not so awesome, or one of the characters has something bad happen. And instead of forever, 3D modeling them in, you can take a second and take that as an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah.
Or, you can do it intentionally from the start where you set up, maybe throw out some breadcrumbs that they're going to not make it, and then change the perspective of the film with that. Because that is one of the things where not only is it, kind of shocking, but you can have it make sense, and it also supports reality. So much of the time in reality, things happen outside of our control. We have to change horses, midstream, and people die. These are all very real things that can be tackled in a way that isn't shown as just negative, although there is not a lot of positivity to it. It's part of life, and so like introducing that in a way I think is not only beneficial to the reality of the information you're imbuing to your audience, but also very kind of fun in the, like you were saying, the shock factor. Well, from death to rebirth, what you got next?
So you're talking about, things being a shock factor. Sometimes I like things being consistent.
Consistency?
I know, outrageous. but I do love when power systems are coherent. And there's something to be said for kind of quote-unquote soft magic, which is where things aren't prescribed.
Opposed to hard magic?
Yeah, as opposed to hard magic, where there are rules that you kind of need to follow. Or you're supposed to follow, and if you don't, you're breaking your own rule set, and it feels very disingenuous.
More like guidelines. Sorry,
Shut up. And there's a couple of great examples that leap to mind when talking about power systems, and one, because I just have to mention the name, Sanderson. Sanderson always, for basically everything he's ever written, has some kind of power system. And I think the easiest one to think about is Mistborn, which is basically where everyone gets to kind of be Magneto. But it's all based on metal. And they each have their own properties, and you can burn them to do something specific. But they never, deviate.
Mm-hmm.
If you're burning pewter, it's always strength. If you're burning, I think bronze is one of the ones for, emotional manipulation. Things like that. And he's got a couple different kind of alloy systems, because they're called alloymancy. He's got a couple in there, but they all follow the same consistent rules. Until, the very, very end, where shit gets a little weird, but, pretty much for 3 books, it very much obeys one system. And the other kind of wackier example that really sticks out is the idea of Nen in the show Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And Nen it's so expansive and willing to be off the fucking wall, but it has very coherent rules, and it makes a point that people can be overpowered under specific circumstances.
Yeah.
And because there's kind of a bartering system that exists in Nen, so you can always make trades for more power. But usually at some kind of contract or limitation that comes with it. One of the main characters is not super powerful in any way, shape, or form. Krapka is kind of a B-lister at best. Realistically speaking, they can kind of hold their own in a fight, but they're nothing special.
Yep.
However, they are God when it comes to fighting 13 select people, because they've made a bargain that they can basically tap into this absolute nullification kind of power only if it's against them. If he uses it on anybody else for any reason, he just dies. That's his contract with that power. So, super narrow in focus, super busted in practice, but God forbid he just fights somebody who isn't one of them, he's kind of useless. So it does such a good job allowing itself so much novelty without feeling like cheating, because it rewards creativity, and I like when things are written that allow for that. It's not necessarily super rigid, but allows for genuine creativity, both in how you write your characters and how they solve problems.
I really like the idea, the aspect, especially with Nen, where you can... It's another one of those things of paying costs, right, and balancing, kind of like we were talking about the problem with the way disabilities are shown, even if you want it to be a positive, there's no negative associated. With Nen, it's basically, from what I've understood of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you basically have, your character will have a set amount, effectively, if you look at it like a chart,
mm-hmm.
where it goes 10 tall, 10 across. I don't know about everybody, but, there is a set line of, it's across the board. It'll be 3 up. Or you could take, so that's technically 30. So instead of being across the board at a 3, you could centralize it to where it's a 10, but only for a very set area, which sounds like kind of Kropka kind of does.
Yeah.
Where it's just okay, well, what if I was just insane in this exact circumstance? And isn't that kind of what what's his face does as well? Creepy clown guy.
Sokka. There we go.
Yeah. Like, isn't that kind of what he does with his power? Just like, I mean, that
Um,
one he just like knows his power super
it's
well,
more
but
that
like
he knows it inside and out, and
yeah,
he's willing to kind of cheat with the rules of the world. Because, like, he kind of cheats death in a really clever way because he knows he's dying. He's like, I bit off more than I can chew. I can't win this fight. But there's kind of a caveat that someone's nen is stronger after they die. So he basically puts one of his things is like, it's called bungee gum. It's like this elastic putty almost that's super sticky. And so he puts it inside his chest and hooks it to his heart and rib cage. So it like resuscitates him when he dies. Which
oh
is
wild.
which is like, it feels kind of cheatsy, but it's been well established that nen is stronger after a person is dead. So it's like, yes, but also no. Like, there's precedent for him being able to kind of get away with this. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
But I mean, I think that it sounds like the most important thing here is stick to your rules and have precedent. Like, have it not come out of nowhere. Kind of like the opposite of like the surprise power ups, where it's just like going along la ti da and wow. It's like, wait, the fuck you can do that? All of this has been set up where it's like, okay, we are, this is the way the system works.
It's just a very clever exploitation of the existing system.
Yeah. I think that's like the most important thing, and also something that is tangible that can be taken away by an audience member, especially kids, is basically learning to read the rule book and be like, okay, how can I break it?
Yeah.
How can I play within it, but like play within the letter of the law while breaking the spirit of the law, which is kind of what, Ahsoka's doing with the thing. It's like, okay, I know that X, so the way to exploit it is Y, therefore Z, kind of, theory crafting. That's really, really cool. And like, it's a great showcasing of why power ceilings aren't a bad thing and like the way to write them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like inadvertently what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few characters in there that are just kind of OP. Like, they're a little bit cheatsy, but they're still beatable. Like, because you can be creative and kind of work around them.
Or like, I mean, there's times where people go above and beyond. Like Gong goes above and beyond at one point, but shaves like years off his life.
Oh no, he basically just kills himself. Like,
okay,
yeah, he's like put into a functional coma, and people are like, I ain't touching that thing. That's a monster.
But I mean, like, that's like for the most part, every single rule in those shows is one of those ones that instead, to do something great, it's like Full Metal Alchemist. Nothing
is free.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important thing, and also, great life lesson to teach and have. I love wish fulfillment, but at a certain point, you're being disingenuous to your audience because you're showcasing a circumstance that is not only doesn't exist in real life, it's not a human occurrence.
Yeah.
When you're just like cheating and doing this thing that's so fantastical, it's like, I don't want to say just go make an action movie with no plot, but like, why are you writing plot if you're going to have it be broken? You don't set up rules to break them. You set up rules to show exploitation. There's a difference between exploitation and breaking them. And I think that's a very big fundamental understanding of this, is that, just because you give yourself limitations doesn't mean that you can't be creative and do things within them. It means you have a box in which you can, like, you have to find different ways of like going beyond the line while technically still being inside the line, which is far more interesting and creative in our opinions.
What do you got next on the up for praise?
So, interestingly enough, even though talking about Game of Thrones and its last handful of seasons definitely, in our opinions, shit the bed.
Bit of a stinker.
Bit of a stinker. One of the really good things that they did was they made death matter in a world where there was constantly death. And I think that's a very important thing to do. And it's not easy, and it's very impressive that they did it. Probably shout outs to George, just given the way things happened when they ran out of source material versus when they had source material.
Yeah.
But the most important thing was he would build up a character and make you care about them so that when he killed them, it mattered. And the people he's killing otherwise are just, soldiers, random people you don't know. But I think that's a really good and very important thing to do, because there's shows that have trouble doing this. And even later in Game of Thrones, they had trouble like making you give a shit.
Yeah.
But finding a way to, because in shows where there's no death and you kill one person, it's gonna matter, and I think that's fine, and that's that's good and fine writing.
Huh.
But to have a show where there is death always and have death matter is a tricky thing, because you remove the sadness value of death by having it so constant. The same thing kind of happened in like Buffy the Vampire Slayer too. You would have like these meaningful characters die in care versus other characters, and I think that's the most important thing is the word meaningful. By like giving time, giving love, giving intrigue to the characters, when you then remove that, as opposed to like say fridging, where you just take a character who had was like around like, because that's the difference is obviously like killing random individual is very rarely going to matter in most media unless again there's no death. But when there is death, how do you make it matter? And the cheap way to say is just give them screen time, which is and isn't true. The thing you need to do is give them likability, or basically have the audience give a fuck.
You need to make them care.
And the easiest way to make them care is make them likable, make them funny, make them lovable, make them interesting, give them hopes and aspirations. As much as it is a stupid, played out idea and hilarious and hammy at this point, it is kind of like that silly anime trope where it's the second somebody says what they're going to do when they get home from the war, they're 100% not going to get home from the war. It's like that, except written well.
Yeah.
You
I'm
give
5
them
days from retirement.
Yeah, okay. You're fucking dead, Tim. That's it. I don't know if you know that, but you just signed your own death warrant. But that's what it is effectively, is you're taking, okay, I need, make them care, whether it's, give them whatever, and then take that away. Effectively a bait and switch of a sort.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be a bait and switch. It can just be, building up the character and then chopping the legs off. But that is definitely something that does exist, and in great amounts. I think just Game of Thrones probably did it in the early seasons. Probably the best I've ever seen it.
Yeah. Kind of pulling for the supernatural on our last one. I love good monster design. As evidenced by me talking about Godzilla earlier.
Read my lips. I like good monster design. I think it should be instituted in all sci-fi projects.
All right, too much JFK.
Whatever do you mean? No, I just want to make a robot JFK program.
I love good monster design. I love when it's when it's appropriately threatening. I like things that are novel and kind of strange. Like I like good monsters. Not that there's anything wrong with like classic like good werewolves. Fuck you, Harry Potter. The movie for forever tainting werewolves. That bald fucking chemo going asshole. It literally looked like he'd been through chemo. He needed help. Lupin, sorry buddy, but you suck. And one of the best things that you can, especially in terms of horror movies and horror things, is always keep people not sure of what's doing. For monster movies, where the monster is the antagonist, right? Because once you can understand it, well, then you can start to figure it out. You can predict it, and when things are predictable, it's manageable. When it's manageable, it's no longer threatening, it's no longer scary. And so that's why Alien is kind of one of the best classic monster, classic in a sense, but because Ridley Scott had the great idea to ask psychologists what made things frightening, and it's like, well, when it's unpredictable. And so, especially in the early movies, it just kind of kept doing weirder and weirder shit.
It's kind of like that old sad family adage of like the less you know the better. Like, yeah, it also works for monsters in film. It's like the less you know about it, the better the monster is.
Yeah, like they spend so long having it just kind of slink around the ship. It's got like threatening features, like it's got giant claws, it's got the bladed tail, it's bullet resistant essentially. But then you start getting weird, like, oh, it's got acid blood. Awesome. Oh, it's got a mouth in its mouth. Oh my god. It procreates by, using people as personal incubators. excellent. Oh my god, it can survive the void of space. Holy shit. You know, you can't even eject it out the airlock and have it die.
Yeah.
So it's such a good job. Just constantly like, oh, you think you know? You don't know shit. And so I love good monster design, and just when it's genuinely unsettling or, you know, ever present and like threatening. It's so good. Like,
well, and they did a great thing in storytelling where they, instead of doing one of the things that you love, they did the opposite, and it shows the value in different writing styles. Like, one of your favorite things that you noticed that you mentioned earlier was having a coherent power system. Instead of doing that, like, so there's there's two ends of the spectrum here. There's creative monster design, the theory that goes behind it, and there's having a coherent power system. The one we don't like is in the middle, where you define it and then break your own rule.
Yeah.
With, you know, having a coherent system, you set the rules in place, you show that people can bend them without breaking them by having them play within the rules and find, like, you basically lawyer up and find a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
Or you go the Ridley Scott way, where you keep it nebulous. This
Yeah.
is like one of the great things in other forms of storytelling. Like, one of my favorite things is one of my favorite shows ever is Adventure Time. One of the reasons it's so good and it's able to keep this like wacky, free form, anything could happen vibe is because they never make a rule.
No.
Everything, like, also the show's just like, you know, they're constantly hitting the fucking crack pipe, but it's just there's nothing ever tied down, explained that X always works, or, you know, there's very few rules that they ever like come back to or they set. And the same thing with the monster design. It's like, when you don't know that much about it and it's not concrete, you can do anything with it.
Yeah.
And with that, especially when it comes to a horror setting, you get basically the biggest fear you ever could have to a human, which is the unknown. This is the reason we have like racism and stuff like that, is because we don't, you know, it's
I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's tribalism. I know you. I know what you can do and you're capable of. Therefore, I can trust you in as much that I understand like what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
I've never seen brown people before. They could be aliens. And like, so that's the kind of, you know, that's where that fear comes from. And the same thing is true in a roundabout way with Alien. It's just like, this thing could do any, and like the thing that makes Alien even more scary is that it can do all the things that, you know, we effectively racially projecting, you know, with like that kind of other biz, is that, you know, it's like, oh, you know, shit. It can do all the things that I'm afraid of. And then what, you know, okay, we figured out what it can do. Well, we don't know what it can't do. So ostensibly it can do anything. So we're fighting God. You know, that's like what, like, that's the way, like, I presume that the brain goes, like, when, like, getting high on fear, basically.
Yeah.
And with that amount of stunned silence, I think it's,
I don't know what to add to that.
I think it's time for us to go to our first commercial break. We'll be back in a second. See you then. Do you hate being questioned? Does your requirement to adhere to society's unspoken laws of equality and evidence annoy you? Do you yearn for the good old days you never got to experience, where men were men and women were all trollops for the taking? Well then, Pilgrim, have I got the snake oil for your wagon wheel. With bang bangs galore and pithy lines aplenty, you'll have yourself an out-of-tune grand piano of a great time for days with Westerns. Yes, at an ungodly 2+ hour run time that could be summed up on the back of a 6-ounce milk carton, Westerns have got you covered. With the absurd showcasing of an utterly maligned people, non-existent consent statutes, and a form of law that would never hold up in any court. And wait, there's more. I'm just kidding, that's it. Now what are you waiting for? Plug in that old VCR and get back to throwing racial epithets at those darn engines, now without any social condemnation.
And welcome back, everybody. So,
Hello!
So Isaac, what have you got to pitch the people for the week?
My pitch this week is codenamed very, just, you know, on the nose, Dead Planet.
What could this possibly be about?
I had this idea when I was passing out high as shit on fucking
Excellent start.
and I had to like scrabble to my computer to write this down before passing out. So my notes are loose to say the best. But this idea of what would it be if when you died, we're all wrong, that there is like this kind of reincarnation, but it's not on the same planet. It's on a different planet, and you're reincarnated with your memories in a different body with a different sounding voice and not around the same, like, you know, if you died in America, you would be reborn on, you know, Earth 2
Sure.
in, you know, Gibraltar or something like that. You know, just you're just like out of time, out of space, and not around the people that you were around. You know, so it's not like, oh, hey, Auntie, you know, glad to see you. You're looking different. You know, you're just like, I remember being this person, and just kind of all that would come with that circumstance. Trying to find, you know, if somebody killed you, trying to find them. You know, is there an Earth 3, or is this, you know, is this the end of the line? You know, how deep does this rabbit hole go? What about, you know, the love of your life? What if, you know, you die, you're reborn, and you remember spending all this time with somebody you love, but they're no longer around you? What do you do? And this kind of like fun sandbox of absurdity.
God, reincarnation is scary.
Yeah, it's like an interesting idea, you know, because the idea of reincarnation is, from what I remember from my history of religions class, is that you know, you're reincarnated with none of your memories, potentially as a human, potentially not as a human, you know, depending how good or bad you were. This is like the Buddhist, I think, or maybe it's Hindu version of reincarnation that I'm remembering.
I'm not gonna speak because I don't know, and I don't want to prove my ignorance.
It's one of the two. Sorry, I can't remember. I apologize to the community that I'm getting.
We're idiot Christians. Forgive us, please.
Yeah. I am mildly red, not well. But just this, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a fun thought of like, wait, what would happen? Is, you know, that I remember a bunch of years ago, you were telling me the best, or where all writing comes from is, what if?
Yeah, that's Stephen King's interpretation on stories. Is they should all start with the question of what if.
Yeah. Wait, in the writing process, not or in the writing, like when you're writing from scratch, not when you're writing the first page.
Yeah.
And so it very much just kind of caught me. I was like, you know, hi, Isaac was like, what if? And just wrote down this like really loose idea, then passed out.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm awake, Isaac, and I'm like,
well, what if?
Yeah, well, what if? What about you? What you got to pitch this week?
So, rough title, Birth of a Villain. So think of, I'm gonna play with me for a second. Think Peter Parker.
Okay.
Right? Think early fucking Spider-Man days. Everything is a bit shitty. Like, he's a struggling grad student. He's trying to, you know, pay the bills and keep his apartment. His boss is an asshole who laughs in his face all the time.
J. Jonah Jerkface.
J. Jonah Jerkface. Listen, as much as I love J. Jonah Jameson, guy's an asshole. Like, guy's an absolute tool. And, you know, at night he's fucking fighting crime, sometimes getting the shit beat out of him. He's losing sleep, stressed out of his mind. What happens if he fucking snaps? Like, he's had J. Jonah Jameson laughing in his face one too many times, and he just goes fucking postal. He just sees red and just punches someone.
Yeah.
They're dead. That's what happens. They're gone. I mean, this is somebody who can casually fucking flip a car. Like, that person's head explodes. That's what happens to that person. Then what happens after he has painted the wall with their brain? Because now there is a sudden moral quandary. Like, does the high road win out? Does he go turn himself in? Does he try and rectify the situation as best as possible? Or does he just say, fuck it. I'm done working for you assholes. You have mistreated me for the last time. I'm gonna do something about it. Who's gonna fucking stop me? Huh? Fuck y'all. So, did
you ever see the movie Falling Down?
No.
That's what it's called. So, it's a bit of a, I don't say problematic movie, but it can be a little divisive depending upon who you talk to. But the idea of falling down is that who's the main actor in this? Michael Douglas's character has like a bad day. He's also like going a little crazy and is not in a good headspace. And just kind of freaks out and kind of it's a little bit of wish fulfillment of like getting angry at a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, it's wish fulfillment for, like what was this 90s white men in America, so it gets a little racial.
Yeah, of course.
Little is very much in quotation. But it's this idea of like what happens if a in quotes good man or just average, American Joe freaks out and kind of does what he's always thought about doing, but had the kind of wherewithal to keep it together.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that on, it's super falling down.
Yeah. It's like, that idea of like with great power comes great responsibility. Like, yeah, what if you started good and just lost it? Like just through like not from anything, instantly traumatic or, life altering shift in view, or like, no one died in a car crash. No one shot your best friend, but just...
So you had a bad day.
Yeah, none of that. It was just like the fucking doldrums and the tedium and the stress and the burnout and the expectations. It just, at a certain point, just like the switch flicked, all you saw was red, and suddenly, your secret is out, and there is a dead person. Because you aren't normal... You can kill people on accident.
Yeah. It's a very fun idea to play with. I feel like they play with that a little bit in The Boys, like from time to time, to a much lesser, like kind of character study extent.
I'm gonna say it's kind of it's more a fact, and it's less like a moral quandary typically.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this would be. I think I'd want to go more on like the moral thing, like, okay, well, cat's out of this bag, what do we do with it? Like, because, I mean, there's a clear appeal to either one. Like, if you were raised with, like, morals and kind of a decent sense of, like, I'm not going to say self-righteousness, but, like, if you have a decent, like, code of ethics, there we go, that works. Like, killing people just abruptly, like, there's going to be regret, there's going to be guilt, there's going to be shame.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's those other things.
Of course, but
maybe maybe I can just take whatever the fuck I want. Yeah. So that is my thought.
That's a really fun one, dude. That one has like mad legs. I think, like, especially depending upon like. I think the real difficulty is, sadly, like, the kind of, like, snapped into good, snapped into bad is so commonplace in a lot of media that it's going to be difficult writing it slow, oddly. Because, like, with, like, one big action, everybody kind of feels that in different ways. Not that it's realistic, but they have moments where they, like, you snap, and then you end up snapping back usually, but you snap at somebody, you yell at your friend, your significant other, like things like that happen, so it's a lot more of a human connection. People don't realize the slow gradual change that they do, and then like leading into a potential snap or a mistake because it's so nuanced. So I think the difficulty with writing that will be nuanced, but the payoff is just so strong, dude. That is fucking cool. Cannot wait to see what you do with that one. That one is fucking rad.
Oh, thank you. What have you got to recommend?
When the good have a bad day, they have it bad. Horrible tagline.
It's a miserable tagline.
Yay!
But now, hopefully, you're going to recommend something with a much better tagline.
I don't know what the tagline for this is. Actually, hold on. Let me see. Did it have a tagline? No, it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't need one. Fucking movie's amazing. The rec that I have this week is Everything Everywhere All at Once, which you haven't seen it. Everyone should. Everywhere should see Everything Everywhere All at Once. Not even a sympathy laugh? Come on.
No. Nothing.
Wah.
No pity laugh.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is amazing. There is once I can get my co-host here to get off his duff, spend $4.99 on YouTube and rent it, and just have his brain melted
And
as
then
I
sit
have,
on his duff.
and sit on his stuff. I'm sure we will do an episode talking about it. You have until then to watch it yourself, so we're not spoiling it because the last thing I want to do is spoil this movie. It is just so amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. It does the one of the things I talked about a movie a while ago in Sucker Punch, and it takes the simplistic and turns it fantastical in its own different way. Awesome. It deals with like the idea of multiple divergent universes in a way that really hasn't been shown, and definitely in a way that hasn't been talked about, with like a thematic like kind of overtone that is just, oh my gosh. It's amazing. The directors are the same guys that directed the music video for Turn Down for What.
It's a weird claim to fame to go from that to that, but
yeah, you'll see it in the visual storytelling, but not in the way you expect. It's not that kind of like insane, but the way they shot it is just so like the visuals of the movie are amazing. The story, the theme, the takeaway, it's all juice. It is, simply put, I think one of, if not the best movie ever made. Like, it's that good.
Damn.
Follow that up, bitch.
All right. This is one of the best intrigue shows I've watched in quite a while. It's called The Stranger, and it's if you're at all inclined for things like John Grisham or Brad Meltzer or anything kind of that ilk. This is
a book
very
or a
much
show?
for you. This is both actually. It was originally a book.
Is it on Albert Camus?
I don't remember who wrote the book. Let me check. Stranger. It is.
And what's the when did this movie come? Is it movie or TV show?
It is a show. It is an 8-episode show. It came out 2020, so quite recent.
Okay.
Relatively recent.
Yeah.
But yeah, its pacing is outstanding. Its dialogue is really good. Its use of tension is really good. And its use of information and intrigue is superb. Like, I stayed up till 1 a.m. watching it. I had to go to work the next day. Didn't give a shit. I was watching it because I wanted to know. Like, it's really good. And it doesn't get more grandiose than it needs to. It keeps things. It's very very small scale. Like, it's not this grand. The world isn't fucking ending.
Yeah.
There's nothing super blown out of proportion or hyper nefarious, and it's still super enthralling. Like,
that's awesome. I love when like shows are able to do that where they don't have to. I feel like I was talking with somebody about this recently. When you can, there's so much of this like fantastical shows or Marvel or whatever, like these huge, like where the stakes are gigantic to the point where they're always the same and always just so beyond us that we're like, we get it. It's like it isn't always, but it effectively is. The end of the world if they don't do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool when shows are able to dial that back. Still have you kind of like what I was saying with like deaths mattering, even though there's death all around you. It's like having something matter when it's like not necessarily. I haven't watched the show, although I'm sure I will after my co-hosts recommend. But to reduce the stakes to where it's almost like pedantic and understandable, but it still matters to the character and we're invested, I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, and it does a good job tying together kind of disparate story points. It does a very good job pulling things to meet in the middle. And it does some very cool, you will appreciate some of the way it does, like, transitions between points. Like, one of the ones that comes to mind is a guy who walks into a police station to file a report,
Mm-hmm.
and the camera pans and starts following a detective who is another character point of focus as the transition as he walks back into a different room.
That's one of my favorite things.
They do it's really well done from a cinematography standpoint as well. It's very good.
That the first place I ever saw that, and I've wanted to do it ever since I've seen it. It's said since we're talking about since this episode was about this, it is just effectively. It can and can't be a storytelling maneuver, but when as like a way to transition, there's this great episode of Aziz Ansari's
Master of None.
Master of None. Thank you. It's in season 2. It's called NYC I Love You or I Love NY or something like that. And it's like got 5 or 6 different, I think the episode's like 20 or 30 minutes long. It's got 5 or 6 different characters that's following around through a day in New York. And the way it does transitions is people walk into the same frame and then it holds on a different character. So, character A you'll be following them for a while and they'll walk into a liquor store and walk past character B, and then the camera just holds on character B, and then we follow them for a while. It's so fucking cool and so underutilized. Love it. Glad to hear other shows are, picking that up and doing what I love so much about that in other shows.
Do you have any musical recommendations before we send the people out to the world?
I was actually thinking about this because I sent this album to a friend of mine and to a friend of ours in Captain Coco. There's this album by Aesop Rock called Spirit World Field Guide. If you're a fan of rap or hip hop, this album is so cool. It's got some of the best instrumentation that I've heard in quite a while. It's got good. The lyrics are fantastic. Just a big fan. I don't know about helping you write, but definitely get you in a groove. So check it out. Aesop Rock, Spirit World Field Guide. Especially the song Gauze. I think is like Gauze, Jump in the Coffin, and like Coveralls or something like that. There's like the 3 like banger tracks for me. So
I think that is our episode. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And if you enjoyed it, please feel free to
like,
comment,
share,
and subscribe.
And don't forget, new episodes of Super Pros Bros come out the 1st and 3rd Saturday of every month.
Bye. Oh, Lord.
Hey, y'all. Ike here to remind you that you've got just 1 week before we record our anniversary episode. So if you want to hear us answer your burning question, send them on over to superprosbros@gmail.com. That's superprosebros@gmail.com. And tune in next week for our awesome answers.